This is my final discussion for week 8. I'm going to start by responding to Stanley's video on Beale's lecture about Revelation as symbolism versus liberalism. He mentioned that the main means of communication is symbols and revelations, and agreed with Dr. Beale on this point. Stanley also talked about the 500 uses of Old Testament and Revelations, and this really challenged me as the use of literal translation to determine the symbolism from the Old Testament. I thought that this was really interesting. I was not sure about Stanley's response on what the spirits were, if they were angel spirits like Dr. Beale said, or if they were spirits, our different kind of spirits that we had, like Stanley had mentioned. Emotionally from this class, I've grown a lot. I feel like I've learned that God has called me to school, which I had known before, but he would help me through emotionally as a lot of difficult things happened in my personal life during this particular course. I really felt God's hand in guiding me, and one of the things that was really important is that the use of prayer before I started studying or writing, that I would just lay down my concerns that were happening in with my family to God and let him be my guide and clear my mind so I could focus on his word and the message that he wanted me to learn in that particular assignment. Spiritually, I learned to diligently seek God and study to find out the meaning from first what the original author wrote to his audience at the time to what it means now today. There were several verses that I learned throughout this course that I had thought I knew what they meant, and by further studying them, a couple of those verses was from 2 Chronicles 7:14, where I learned the context of that. That's about humbling and praying that God would heal our land, and that he was talking to them about their land at the time, not necessarily our land. That doesn't mean that he doesn't still call us to pray. Another verse was 2 Corinthians 6:14, where God says, "Do not be yoked with an unbeliever." Many times people take this to apply to marriage, and when I studied it on my own, I learned that it's not just marriage. It can be in business or just relationships in general. If you take them to another level, that you need to be careful to that the other person is a believer. Intellectually, I learned about translations, the functional and the formal translations, that the formal ones were based more on word-for-word translations, and the functional ones were phrase by phrase, and they're a little easier to understand, but they're a lot further from the original Greek and Hebrew writing of the original Bible. So it's better to go with a formal version and do your own study. That's one of the assignments that I really enjoyed, was doing the word study and looking at the single word in the context of the entire Bible, the Testament, other books written by the same author, and then in the passage itself, and looking into the Greek or Hebrew meaning behind the word. I had never done that before. I found that interesting, that there's so many different words for one English word that we have. There's a lot more, and we need to understand what they mean in the correct context. Intellectually, I learned not to get caught up on right and wrong. Sometimes when I was asked a question for an assignment, I wanted to figure out what right and wrong was. And not that there is not a right and wrong answer, but that it's okay to rely on my opinion and my thoughts and not just on other people's. And when I first started, it seemed like I used commentaries a lot. And then when I learned in this class to do inductive study, where you take away even the headlines of the paragraph and make your own outline and what it means, it was very meaningful for me to be able to study God's word in my own mind instead of everybody else's opinion on what the verses meant, to interpret it just with me and God, really. I enjoyed the assignment that was analyzing the parable, the sermons that two people wrote. I fortunately got 2 very good sermons, but I really liked digging in and seeing if I agreed with them or not. Often we go to church and then leave, and I don't take the time to do that. And I think it's really important that we know that what we're saying is learning is accurate. I really enjoyed this class. Thanks for listening.